We're so done with new year, new you. This year, it's more you on Bumble. More of you shamelessly sending playlists, especially that one filled with show tunes. More of you finding Geminis because you know you always like them. More of you dating with intention because you know what you want. And you know what? We love that for you. Someone else will too. Be more you this year and find them on Bumble.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
This half hour being brought to you by our good friends at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 Hummel's Wharf. Online at sunburymotors.com. For Kia Hyundai, best in new inventory. All with great warranties, I might add. Great pre-owned inventory with the Sunbury Motors guarantee. They go over each vehicle with a fine-tooth comb. And a terrific service department. Whether it happens to be quick lane, inspections, routine, difficult, they handle it all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. All right. Todd Zolecki now joins us, and yes, what a great podcast it is. The Phillies Show with Ruben Amaro, Jim Salisbury, and Todd himself. Sir, welcome. Always a pleasure.
Hi, hey, how are you doing? I'm doing well.
I have to start with this. Under the category of, you have to be kidding me, Hal Steinbrenner is complaining how much the Dodgers are spending. When you saw that, again, consider the source. When you saw that, what did you think?
Well, I just immediately thought about, I wonder how George Steinbrenner would be running the Yankees these days because, for years and years and years, he was the guy outspending everybody and not giving a hoot how much he was spending. So definitely a different, Hal is definitely a lot different than his father in terms of the willingness to go all in to secure the top talent available.
It's interesting, isn't it? Now, Sasaki was the latest big one for the Dodgers, but they're going to be up about $500 million. How interested are you to see how Sasaki pitches in the majors? Because this isn't always a slam dunk when it happens.
No, I'm super interested to see how he does. I mean, all the reports from him from Japan is that this guy has immediate top-of-the-rotation stuff, throws in the high 90s, touches 100, has some great off-speed stuff. And so, I guess I want to see if the hype matches his performance. Yoshinobu Yamamoto last year was a similarly hyped Japanese pitcher that came over. He had some injury issues, pitched pretty well in the postseason, was kind of hot and coldish during the regular season, when he wasn't hurt. But by all accounts, Sasaki is maybe better than him. So
right.
Yeah, I'm really interested because they, Los Angeles right now has kind of cornered the market on these Japanese superstar players that want to come play Major League Baseball. Of course, Ohtani, then Yamamoto, then Sasaki. So, if these guys kind of deliver as everybody expects, man, the Dodgers have a really good pipeline right now of talent that just wants to keep coming and playing for Los Angeles.
All right, so Todd, with the Phillies going to spring training, what will be a couple of things that you're going to look for right away so that they can maybe close a gap? When I mean close a gap, I'm not talking about a chasm, a gap.
Between the Phillies and the Dodgers?
Between the Phillies and anybody. Let's just start Phillies in their own division and Phillies then maybe against the rest of the field.
Yeah, for me, honestly, I think it's just a matter of, and Dave Dombrowski has said this, they already have their star players. I know everybody wanted the Phillies to take a run at Juan Soto this offseason and whatnot, but really for me, it's just a matter of their stars playing like stars. Bryce Harper, I think, has certainly lived up to the hype and delivered year after year when he's healthy. I think you'd like to see more consistency from somebody like Trey Turner, for instance. JT Realmuto is entering the last year of his contract. You'd like to see him bounce back after a down year. You'd like to see Ranger Suarez stay healthy an entire season. So I think if their established players can just kind of do what they're supposed to do, I think they can close that gap. I would still pick the Phillies to win the National League East over the Braves and the Mets. I think they're the better team. I think they have the best rotation. I think, again, when everybody's firing all cylinders, I think they have one of the best offenses in baseball. I know people listening right now are going to go, yeah, but what about the last year in the NLDS and the second half of last season when they were kind of a 500 team? And I totally get that. But I think, again, just if the talent plays to the talent level they are, I think they should win the division, and I think they have as good a chance as anybody in Major League Baseball of knocking off the Dodgers in the postseason.
Right. No, I do too, because look, it starts with the rotation. To me, Zach Wheeler is exactly the guy you want to hand the ball to in any critical situation, but he's not the only one you have to hand it to. What do they need out of Aaron Nola behind him as the season goes forward?
Nola, for me, he's been one of the most durable, reliable pitchers in baseball, and he will have his runs throughout the course of his season where he struggles and whatnot. But for me, Aaron Nola, man, if he can just go out there and make 30 to 33 starts like he usually is, 190 to 210 innings like he usually does, I think the production is going to be there. I think Nola had a pretty solid year last year. Mm-hmm. He has pitched pretty well in some clinching game situations for wild card clinchers, division title clinchers, etc. So, for me, it's not so much Aaron Nola. I personally I am more curious to see what Ranger Suarez does this year. He was, to make the argument, he was the best pitcher in baseball the first 3 months of the season, and then he had injuries and kind of struggled down the stretch. I would like to see him stay healthy and see what he can do for an entire year, and I'm also curious to see what Jesus Luzardo does. He's the guy, the lefty they got from the Marlins in late December. If he's healthy, he's a top-of-the-rotation, number 3-ish or better type starter, and if he returns to form after being hurt last year, I think that Phillies rotation can go toe-to-toe with the Dodgers.
What do you think of the bullpen? Because, by the way, I agree with everything you said about Nola. Because if I'm sitting there and a number 2, and that's my number 2, in any organization, I'm feeling good about what I have. What about the bullpen part of it? How do you that's always been the one that in any organization is always the trickiest part, because you and I know that usually teams that go really far have 1 or 2 guys where it may not be their career year, but it's the second best year of their career.
Right. Yeah, I think going into the season, if you were going to put like a question mark on something, offense, rotation, defense, bullpen, you'd probably, I guess, put it on the bullpen. And I say that because Jeff Hoffman is now pitching for the Blue Jays. Carlos Estevez is now pitching for the Royals. They were 2 of their big right-handed arms in the back end of the bullpen last season. And to replace them, they signed Jordan Romano, who was a really good all-star closer for the Blue Jays for a couple of years before he got hurt last year. He's on a 1-year deal. They signed Joe Ross, who kind of pitched very well out of the Brewers bullpen last year. He's going to fit in there somewhere. But now you're kind of relying on Orion Kirkring, who's has a ton of talent, has a ton of potential. The Phillies love him. And they're saying, listen, we think that Romano is going to bounce back from his injury, and we're also really confident that Kirkring can step in and take step up and take a step forward as a late inning reliever. So I think a lot is really depending on Romano and Kirkring. They're not sure bets, but then, like you said, the bullpen, generally speaking, is volatile from 1 year to the next. Matt Strahm has been really just a blessing since they signed him. Can he kind of continue to be a top-notch late-inning reliever? But they also need Jose Alvarado to bounce back. I mean, he was more cold than hot, I would say, last season, and didn't he didn't really figure into Rob Thompson's stable of most trusted relievers down the stretch. But if Alvarado can find the strike zone again, now you have something cooking. But you listen to the answer, and there's a lot of like, if this guy does this, Romano bounces back. If Kirkring takes a step forward, if Alvarado bounces back, they have the makings of a really good bullpen. They do. I don't think it's a huge stretch that those things happen. I think they definitely can happen. But again, it's, you talk about question marks in the team, and that's probably where I would start with the bullpen.
Well, you know what, though? If we were talking about just strictly the Dodgers here, they have some ifs as well. So everybody has that at that part of the team. Rob Thompson has established himself in many ways. What do you like about him as a manager? And every once in a while, what questions do you have about him as a manager?
Well, the thing I like about him the most as a manager is his ability to handle people. I truly believe that is the most important job of a major league manager nowadays. Of course, is it important to make out a good lineup? Sure, but there's arguments can be made that you move one guy up or you move one guy down. It really doesn't matter that much, depending on who you talk to. But having a manager that the players respect really is important. He talks to these guys every day, good or bad. They respect him. So then when he needs to maybe bench a player or sit a player or discipline a player, I think those words matter. So, he's just a great people person in general. He's fair. He's accountable. He's likable. And he reminds me a lot of Charlie Manuel in that regard. But I also do think he runs a good game. I do think he runs a good game. I think if you had to nitpick something with Rob Thompson, and he's kind of acknowledged this, sometimes maybe he can be too loyal to a fault. I think we saw that a little bit at the end of the 2023 postseason in NLCS. He stuck with some relievers that maybe he shouldn't have. He stuck with maybe Johan Rojas in center field maybe when he shouldn't have. I think you saw him adjust to that. And my example would be Game 4 of the NLDS. The results didn't turn out, but he benched Austin Hayes, who they got at the trade deadline. They got Austin Hayes because they wanted him to start against left-handed pitching, and he got benched in Game 4 of the NLDS when the Mets had lefty Jose Quintana on the mound. He started Weston Wilson instead. Again, it didn't work out, but it shows that he's flexible and willing to adjust.
You know what's interesting, though? When I'm trying to operate a clubhouse 162 games, loyal to a fault doesn't bother me that much because you're out there trying to go out there every day and win games. And I know you've got to sometimes make that impersonal decision, but to me, loyalty is rarely a detriment. That's how I view it.
No, I agree with that. Especially because one of the reasons why Rob in the past was loyal to a guy and maybe unwilling to make a quick change is because players. You mentioned the 162-game season. They're used to the routine. They're used. They can kind of smell fear from a manager. Yeah. And so if Rob in the postseason is going, oh, my gosh, we didn't hit in the first two games. We're going to go crazy and change the lineup. And I'm going to bench this guy. I'm going to start this guy because this guy didn't have a couple good games. And the players go, oh, my gosh, the manager's panicking. I was just watching the Netflix documentary on the 2004 Red Sox, and Terry Francona was saying the same thing. He's like, the manager really sets the tone in that clubhouse, and they can smell desperation, concern, fear from their manager. And I think Rob Thompson does a great job of kind of hiding that. But again, and here's another example of Rob's willing to make a move and adjust, is that he benched Alec Bowman Game 2 of the NLDS last year, So he kind of has learned to adjust and make changes if he thinks it's going to benefit the team.
Yeah, I mean, people sense panic. Rob doesn't look, at least from the outside looking in, I've never met him, doesn't seem like a guy that panics very much. You see what the Mets did in the offseason. We all knew that Cohen was going to spend a ton of money somewhere because that's his MO. In reality, are they any better?
Well, I think they're probably better. I mean, Juan Soto, certainly he's on track to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer, and he's on track to be one of the greatest hitters in baseball history. So anytime you add a guy like that, I think certainly, you could say you make the improvement. But they don't really have anybody to play first base right now. They're kind of in a contract stalemate with Pete Alonso. So if they don't bring back Pete, that's a 30, 40 home run guy you lose. You add Soto, you lose Alonso. So are they better? They didn't really go out, in my opinion, and get that surefire, lockdown, number one Zach Wheeler type guy in the rotation. I think they're very good. Could they come into the playoffs again and get to the World Series? Sure, they absolutely could. But again, on paper, I would take the Phillies as a better team. I might even take the Braves as a better team.
Yes, I agree.
They're going to get Ronald Acuna Jr. back. They're going to get Spencer Strider back. They're expecting some. Austin Riley is going to be back. He missed some time last year, so maybe a bounce back season for Matt Olson. So, I think a lot of people are focusing on the Mets because they got Soto, but I think if you asked people across baseball how to rank the division, I don't think you would get a consensus or maybe even a majority of people that would say the Mets are the NL East favorites.
Right. No, agreed. Look, the Phillies are a better team. I agree with you. The Braves are a better team. Soto's interesting. Very few players have the concept of the strike zone that he does. He is a great hitter. He is a mediocre base runner. And he's actually, when you watch him in terms of a route runner in the outfield, he's mediocre. He's a very interesting, to me, he is. There's a lot of contradictions with him, but there's no doubt as a strike zone guy and as a hitter, he's fabulous. That's my opinion.
No, I agree with you there. I mean, I watching him play, even with the Padres, when he was at the Padres in 2022 in the NLCS, I was like, gosh, this guy is just not a very good defender. You saw it with him when he was with the Nationals as well. But, I was like, wow, I guess I didn't realize that he was that average or below average defensively.
Yep.
You're not getting him for the glove, of course, but you like to have those complete players whenever you can. But, yeah, I mean, he's a fantastic player to watch. He's going to cause the Phillies tons of fits over the next decade or so. But, you don't get a home run every time you get up to bat either.
How excited are you just to see them get on the field and go to spring training again? Because when I was at the Fiesta Bowl for that, Penn State practiced at the Angels complex, and I was like, man, spring training's got to be in a month. It was kind of exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. I will say, when the season ends, it's great to have a break. And then, of course, I have 3 little kids at home, so Halloween, and you have Thanksgiving, and you have Christmas, and then you have New Year's. And so that's a lot of fun, of course. But then once New Year's Day passes, and then you look outside, and all you see is like this cold, gray, dreary weather. All the leaves are gone, and I start going, oh, man. I can picture myself in Clearwater in 75-degree sunny weather. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting down there. It's going to be, it's always exciting those first few days. Just to get outside, warm weather. You see the guys in uniform. You start to feel like it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time for all the players and for the fans and even the people that are writing about the team, like myself.
Yeah. Again, once you get to that certain point. The spring training to me is still that feeling of renewal. That's still the way I look at it. Hey, thanks.
I always tell people that, anytime a Phillies fan, they go, oh, do you go to spring training? And I always ask them, like, have you ever been? And a lot of people, of course, have been to Clearwater for spring training. I sit and then they go, no, I've never been. I go, well, I'm telling you, that should be a bucket list item for every Phillies fan. If you get an opportunity to go to Clearwater for a few days, a long weekend, go for a week, stay down by the beach, have a grouper sandwich, and watch some Phillies baseball. I trust me when I say it'll be a great memory for you, down the road.
Yeah. That's always fun. Todd, by the way, how old are the kids?
8, 5, and 21 months.
Oh, it is a fun life for you. All right.
Yeah, it's busy, man. It's busy.
That's great. Oh, that's great. Todd, thanks so much. Look forward to checking in with you as often as possible. And again, the Phillies Show with Ruben Amaro Jr., Todd, and Jim Salisbury, available where you get your podcasts. Thanks so much, Todd.
Thanks. Take care anytime. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Todd Zolecki joining us. All right. We will come back with more in a moment. I mean, we go from Todd Zolecki to Todd Hummel. You can jump in and say hi here. Go ahead.
Never go for a 2 Todd lunch.
Really? I always fear a one-suit lunch.
Yeah,
all right, here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre a la para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
When car repairs get difficult.
Well, I just don't know.
Me neither.
We get good. Sunbury Motors. More than quality new and used cars, Sunbury Motors specializes in complicated auto repair diagnosis. They can handle intricate repairs and even complete auto body with service open Monday through Friday, 7 till 4. And Sunbury Motors has made simple repairs easy. Maintaining your vehicle is necessary. Finding the time to do it is difficult. Welcome to Sunbury Motors Quick Lane. Just walk in or call ahead. Relax in their remodeled waiting room with Wi-Fi, beverages, and snacks. While Sunbury Motors factory-trained techs take care of your oil change, tire alignments, brakes, and inspections. Quick Lane, 6:30 to 6, Monday through Friday, Saturday, 6:30 till 2. Sunbury Motors, Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury. And Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. We take the out of auto repair.
Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
And this half hour brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket, imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, waters, soft drinks, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and out every day. 6 great flavors of slushies. Ready-to-drink cocktails such as Jack Daniel's, High Noon, Crown Royal. And the pickle bar led by the personal favorites, the Barrels and the Dills, indeed second to none. It's all at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Super Bowl, of course, coming up. Eagles and the Chiefs a week from Sunday. Now, you do know, at least I hope, sometimes you have to explain these things just to make sure everybody understands. You know, with Matt the other day, I was talking about the Philadelphia record of, 2-11 in finals since 1983. Okay. Now, while it's factual, you do know the only reason I said it was just to get a rise out of them. That's the only reason why. I'm not being serious here. Okay, I don't care.
I assumed that was your number when you said Monday you had a number for him.
Yeah, I did. That's why. Right, I told you ahead of time, here it comes. And I'm like, okay. I mean, that's the only reason why I was just trying to get, poke the bear a little bit. I really don't care. I'm not that serious about it. You know, that has nothing to do with the game a week from Sunday. If the Eagles are better, they're better. And in a lot of ways, it looks to me like they are better. But the record thing, that was just to poke the bear. It had nothing to do with anything serious in life. And then as the lack of success of a Sixers team or whatever a team may be, or when the Flyers were in it or whatever, has nothing to do with the game a week from Sunday. It's all about the matchups in that particular game. So I was just kidding around. I hope people didn't take it that seriously. It's okay to have fun. And sometimes I have fun at Matt's expense. Oh, goodness gracious. All right. Now, something that we have talked about many times, again, all kidding aside on stuff now. when we are doing the show, we're hoping that at the end of the week you learn something that maybe you didn't know before. We think that's important. So we try to get everybody ahead of the curve on certain things. Like, for example, before New Jersey won in the Supreme Court on the gambling bill, we spent 2 years talking about, hey, look, watch for this, watch for this, watch for this. So when it happened, listeners of the show weren't surprised. Well, another example of that is this ESPN deal with the ACC. For a couple of years now, we've been talking about watch for this, watch for this, watch for this. And, of course, we knew that, Clemson was suing, and, a soft suit, and not like to the emotional level of Florida State, the way they were going after them. And we said the end of January would be the key as to whether we get extended to 2036 beyond what is the current deal at 2027. They had the option to do it. Well, ESPN did pick up that option. So now that contract goes through 2036. So what does this mean for Clemson and Florida State? And Clemson and Florida State, look, they're, to be honest with you, when you're out there and you are suing somebody, guess what you are attempting to do? You are doing it in such a way where you are paying attorneys to represent you in these court cases. It's not inexpensive. So now I think the thought process is that Florida State and Clemson would like to have a little bigger cut of the pie, and there's going to be a brand fund, and that money would then be distributed to schools that annually generate the most revenue for the conference in football and men's and women's basketball. All right? They say if the agreement is finalized, Clemson and Florida State would drop the lawsuits. I think something they would look for would be, after 2031, and a lower grant of rights fee for the final 5 years of the contract. I think they would like that. But Adelson and others make a mistake in this, because they said in that, because the contracts of the SEC, the Big 12, and the Big 10 are up. The Big 10 contract is up before 2031. Okay. We're heading into year number 3 of it coming up. And it's a 7-year deal. So you would start negotiating that deal, the next deal, probably somewhere within 2028, with the idea of late 2028 to then maybe no later than, I think you'd like to get it done before August of 29, but I think you want to get it done right around there. At that point, they're not out. The lower rights fee wouldn't mean anything to them. And so far, the Big Ten, not one time has the Big Ten, let's see, I'm trying to think. No, that's incorrect. One time, the Big Ten had to deal with a school that had to pay money on the rights. And that's Maryland. Nebraska didn't have to. Their deal was up. The 4 West Coast schools didn't have to. Rutgers didn't have to. And so that's, that's where it is. Now, it's one thing about the equal part of this that is interesting. And that is with the ACC, I look back on what Tony Knopp has talked about, and I'm probably going to have lunch with Tony here in about 10 days after he gets back from the Super Bowl. And he always talks about Bill Moose, who at the time of that conversation was the athletic director of Washington State. And he wanted to have make sure that all the money was evenly distributed among all 12 Pac-12 conference teams. And USC, of course, is sitting there as essentially the backbone and the flagship of this thing, saying, like, I mean, eventually it worked in the favor of the other schools. They're sitting there like, you got to be kidding me. If you want to pick a point, a starting point, where USC is saying, hey, next time through, we need to look, it probably was that. And then Bill Moose eventually left Washington State, went to Nebraska, and eventually left Nebraska. I was just checking, by the way, to make sure that I was correct about the Big Ten contract. It runs out the 29-30 season. Okay? So this thing about like lowering the grant of rights in 2031, the Big Ten will have a deal in place probably no later than August of 2029 for the next run-through. All right, so as we mentioned yesterday, year 3 of this contract is where the money starts to jump. Well, year 3 is coming up. But they want everything to be evenly distributed. Well, when Mike Bohn became the athletic director at USC, he's looking around saying, we can't compete with this. Big Ten, there's a lot of rumors at that time about how big the Big Ten rights deal could be. He knew that. That's why he called Mark Silverman over at Fox. He didn't call Kevin Warren. Okay. He called Mark Silverman at Fox. He said, can we get involved in this? Because he knew. And it's one thing to have everything even in the Big Ten because there's so much money. And it's another thing to be even in the SEC because there's so much money. These other conferences now have problems, ACC included, because they're not even in the same financial realm. The Big 12 and the ACC are not in the same financial realm as the Big Ten and the SEC. And I'm going to say this with all due respect, but I think people know where I'm coming from here. Right? Mike Bohn probably sat down in a staff meeting with some people and said, probably looked around and said, why is Rutgers getting this much money and we aren't? And I'm not trying to rip Rutgers, but USC is one of those, right, brands. Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, you know what I mean. I mean, the USC is one of those brands. Right? And he's got to be sitting there saying, why is Rutgers getting more money than we are? Well, in the ACC, if they were to go to this brand-centric model, it's going to hurt the other schools. It doesn't help Pitt. It doesn't help Syracuse, Virginia Tech to do something like this. It just doesn't. And there are going to be a couple of other issues coming up that they're going to have to deal with. Everybody's going to get slightly less in the NCAA tournament basketball distribution. It's not going to be a major hit, but you're going to get slightly less because of the House settlement. So, in the end, I don't think that so far the ACC thing has played out almost exactly as the way we said it would play out. Right? Now, we'll see if there's any wrench thrown in by Florida State and so forth. But when you got to pay, when you're getting projections from your legal team that it's a $500 to $700 million deal to get out of your deal, I don't know. It's
they're just going to give the ACC the panhandle,
right? I mean, in other words, okay, Florida State and Clemson. Let's give credit where credit's due. How often have you heard me mention the Magic 18? the 18 schools that make up 50% of the TV ratings. And it's not a small sample size. It goes back now 8 years. Well, Clemson and Florida State, along with Notre Dame, are the only three outside of the SEC and the Big Ten in that magic 18. So I understand where Clemson and Florida State are coming from. People do want to watch them play. All right? Florida State, the last 10 years, has only had one really great year. That was the Jordan Travis year where they were undefeated. And let's face it, they were ripped off. Yeah, I know they don't have their quarterback. You can argue that, blah, blah, blah. They hadn't lost a game, but they didn't get a chance to be in the Final Four. And, but that's the only great year they've had. Look at the year they just came off of. With Florida State, remember how they put Notre Dame against Florida State in prime time? It was November 9th. Penn State was playing Washington. And Florida State had a terrible year. They ended up being 2-10. Fortunately, they had an FCS game at the end of the year to get the second win. And Notre Dame, I think Florida State took a 3-0 lead, and Notre Dame after that crushed them. And that was supposed to be one of those marquee Notre Dame versus ACC games on national TV that they planned ahead of time, and it ended up being a dud. And that's a big problem. They've got to get themselves back on track now. They want to set up like more Notre Dame Clemson games, maybe a couple more Notre Dame Florida State games. They're going to use the Notre Dame chip to get more eyeballs to TV sets. So it sounds like that's what they want to do. Here's the next part. You have to remember, if you're going to go out there, in other words, say, for example, you have a job and you walk out of your job without anything, you're making the assumption that the world wants you. Now, the world may want you. The vast majority of the time, it takes a little bit longer because the world is like, okay, who are you? Who says Florida State is like there's going to be a line to get them? Right?
I mean, I don't think you can.
I know. That's the issue. That's the issue. And many think that Clemson's less desirable than Florida State. In fact, if you were to talk quietly with people, they would tell you the most desirable school in the ACC is North Carolina. Right? I know a lot of people, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's not even the number one team in their own city. I mean, really. I mean, where do you think Georgia Tech falls in the state of Georgia athletics? Between the Braves, the Falcons, and the University of Georgia. I mean, Augusta National's more popular.
Probably down with the Hawks.
Oh, see, you're always putting down the Atlanta Hawks. Always.
I was going to say, above the Thrashers.
And justifiably, I might add. Yeah. So, right? But that is, right, you have to have, like, when USC puts its name out there, hey, wait a minute, let's get USC. I mean, yeah, I know that the road for Penn State getting into the Big Ten was a rocky one, but everybody in the even, like Bo Schembechler, I'll give you a good example, because John Bacon I've talked to, and John knew Bo very well, okay? I mean, he wrote his biography, the whole deal. And Bo told him straight out, he says, 0 against Penn State, love that school. He says, I just didn't like how the conference went about it. That's why I voted no. Okay? In other words, like, tell us ahead of time what's going on. And they didn't. And that's why, they voted no on principle, not on school. But everybody knew Penn State was going to be a home run for them. And it did. It turned out that way. Okay? I think everybody knew, I know USC didn't have a great opening year, but everybody feels it's a home run. Same thing with Oregon, getting them in. But when you're sitting there as an entity like the ACC is, and you have Stanford and California coming into the league, and they're getting 30% shares, not half, they're getting 30% shares. They're getting $11 million apiece. That's it. Okay? That's what they're getting. And remember, how many people were telling us, you got to get Stanford. Look where they are in the Learfield Cup. The Learfield Cup, with all due respect, when you are talking business, and I'm talking business here, the Learfield Cup means zero. It doesn't even come up in the conversation. The business is about brands, markets, football, and to a much lesser extent, men's basketball. Okay? I mean,
I was going to say, they win the Learfield Cup every year because they're so good in all the Olympic sports.
Yeah, I mean, another big win in beach volleyball. Yeah. You're like, okay, yeah, which is, again, credit to those players for winning it. Okay, winning any championship is incredible. It's hard to win any championship, all right, except for the ones those Sioux claims by default. So, this is where they are. I mean, the ACC is kind of caught. The ACC is caught between a rock and a hard place because they are not the brand of the Big Ten and have the markets of the Big Ten, even though their states do have more population than the Big Ten, believe it or not. Like I'm talking outside, you add in California, that changes. But, I think the ACC has more, I'm trying to think, with Texas now added in. But, I mean, the ACC has markets. They've got Boston, they've got the D.C. area, they've got, the Triangle, they've got Miami, they've got Atlanta, they got Louisville, they're in South Carolina. I mean, they have, but it's just, it's good football. It's not great football. It's now fallen back to being good basketball, not great basketball. I mean, last year I think the ACC got 3 teams into the tournament. When's the last time we ever saw that? And you're not looking at a boatload of ACC teams in this year's tournament either.
I think Duke being so good right now is kind of disguising how bad the rest of the conference has been.
Yeah, that's masking it, because I think North Carolina's only having an okay year, right? Something like
that. They're struggling. They have somebody called them a donut.
Yeah,
they don't have anything in the middle.
No, nothing. So, I don't know. The Florida State thing, I mean, again, they have overvalued and they've overplayed their hand. Now, in 2031, 6 years from now, maybe the landscape has changed. But as of right now, no. Now, it would be wise for them, if it's possible, to negotiate a better grant of rights exit. But as the time goes, that grant of rights number is going to go down anyway. I mean, just no matter what. But I've said once and I've said so many times, I read the Big 12 grant of rights deal, which is what the ACC deal is modeled after. I read it. It's not long. It's only a few pages. It's not an extensive document. And you read it and you go, okay, it's so simple there's no out. That's the interesting part about it. Like, oh, it's complicated here. No, the document is so simple that, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Right? Remember, Florida State's attorneys have been working on this document for how long? Okay, and it's not 500 pages. It's like 5 to 8. And if you can't find it in 5 to 8 pages in years of research, it's not there. Okay? Okay? Again, it's 5 to 8 pages. It's not War and Peace. That's why I've tried to keep explaining to everybody. If you can't find it, when the document is that short and that to the point, it's not there. That's the problem they have. We're going to spend $500 million to get out of this, and we can't find it in like, is there a word here on page 8? Is there a word here on page 4? It's not a huge document. I think people think like it's such an extensive, like 500,000 page document. It's like 5 to 8 pages. It's not much of anything. Dennis Dodd and I have talked about that on the show many times.
Yeah, but they're racking up some billable hours trying to figure out that short document.
Ooh, I'll tell you right now, right? Whatever their law firm is, they're feeling good today. They're like, just keep it going.
I was going to say, all the partners have a new boat.
Yep. But I think they're stuck in there through 2031 minimum and maybe all the way through the 2036. Again, everything we've talked about this over the years, exactly what has changed? Nothing.
I was going to say the facts haven't.
Right. Every time we get to August 15th, where they can declare in or out, they never declare out. Every year, nothing changes. Right? Okay? Except the expected happened, and ESPN kept the contract going through 2036, which, again, you and I expected. There was nothing. Why would ESPN as a business entity not extend it when they can get good programming for a relatively cheap price?
ESPN doesn't make mistakes like that.
Now when it comes to that part,